Hello, everyone. Welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, we're going to be talking about Utopia Season 2, Episode 5. We're going to be talking about who is playing God and what are the ramifications, any of the theories that we have already come up with. Are we right? Are we wrong? Potentially new theories that we have, as well as cycles that we've been noticing, and much, much more as we break this down. It is important to say that if you haven't seen this before, there are going to be tons of spoilers, so please pause this if you don't want any spoilers. Watch the episode, come back, and we will be waiting for you so that you can jump in with us. And if you enjoy our content, then please like and subscribe. And let's go ahead and jump in.
And I just want to apologize to everyone real quick because I do have a little bit of a cough on this episode. So please bear with me, folks, and we'll get through this.
Let's jump into theories that we had. Were we right? Were we wrong? Starting off with who died or who will
Yes.
die.
Yes, you said
So,
that.
what were the theories?
So your theory was that Milner was going to for sure die. She's going to be 86th. My theory was Arby. So I think we're both right on this one, at least. I mean,
I
I.
still think that RB might make it. That's kind of my thought, and I'm sticking with my thought on Milner. We didn't actually see her die, but she seemed deader, if you will.
Yes.
And to me, it's important part in passing on Mr. Rabbit. We can't have somebody take on the mantle of Mr. Rabbit if the existing Mr. Rabbit still exists. So
And
that's
that's
I think it's mostly confirmed.
And that's partially why I still think Arby can die, because if Grant is taking on that torch, that he is gonna die. However, I will agree with you. I do think the way that they set it up with, Jessica Hyde rolling him down the hill and, pulling him and pulling the bullet out of him, I would say that if one of them is going to live, I do think Arby has the better chance of living. I do think Milner, the way that they portrayed it, she definitely looks like she died. Which means Grant has
Absolutely.
killed two Mr. Rabbits now.
Oh, that's devilish.
Oh, yes, he did.
So I think we got some more information about Janus, which means we can talk about the theory we had around Janus. I think originally the theory was that there was a back door and that it you could disable that back door and that would allow Jessica Hyde to still get pregnant if her dad disables that back door. But now we found out that Janus targets the Roma people and that it's even worse than that. Janus actually stops the vaccine from working,
Yes, unless you're Roma.
except in the Roma people. So
Correct.
it's a double whammy. It still has like the end result of what I was kind of thinking is still there as a possibility. I think that I would assume that Jessica Hyde has that blood, that genetic marker,
Right,
whatever it is,
right.
and that she would not be affected by Janus, and
Janus.
therefore she could get pregnant. And I still think that's a good theory.
I think she. Okay, I want to add to this theory. I think she's already pregnant from when she hooked up with Ian. I think that we're going to find out that she is, in fact, already pregnant. Thoughts?
Okay, so if you think that's the case, how do you think that this pays off? Because here's my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
The show is very fast paced, and it doesn't seem like a lot of time transpires during the show. So I kind of feel something similar to you, but I kind of wonder, do we have enough time to really show that off without like having a time skip at the end,
Uh,
like an epilogue?
I think that we could get maybe like if she is sick, like we see her start feeling sick, and, at some point she takes a pregnancy test. I think that they could show it that way. Maybe. I do think that, yeah, if they did a time jump, that might be an easier way to show it. I don't know. I mean, definitely could do that in the next episode.
Yeah, I kind of, well, and I think that ties into another question, which is, do you think that the show is wrapping up at the end of the next episode, or do you think that we're supposed to have more seasons?
I think I think they're gonna tie everything up in a bow. I think it's going to be in a nice little
That's what you
bow.
and I both have been hoping for. It's like, please,
I think
please wrap it up.
like I could see them doing it. You know, they take like the first half to figure out Janus and then figure out where everyone's at. A little bit of a time jump I think would be beneficial. We had a time jump in the past. Have a time jump in the future. We see where all the cards have landed, and then from there it tidies up, but still ambiguous with maybe Mr. Wilson, or sorry, Wilson being Mr. Rabbit. That's what I believe.
Right. It's funny. I kind of feel like there's enough remaining that they can't wrap it up in time, but then I'm also aware that the show has always been a pretty fast-paced show, so they can cram in a lot, so they actually probably can cover all that ground. And I want them to wrap it up, so I'm definitely hoping for that. And so the way that I'm kind of thinking is that, 55-ish minutes of it are all towards just like action-packed wrapping up, the all the arcs that they've
Right.
been working towards. And then last 5 minutes we maybe have like an epilogue. We can jump far enough into the future that we can see Jessica Hyde maybe has a kid, maybe with Ian, maybe they're visiting Becky's grave, and that
Ooh.
can kind of, tie into the I don't think that there's a cure for deals. She has deals. We're seeing the effects of it.
Right.
So it feels like that has got to be getting her. We could do a lot of things like that to kind of tie that up. And we could even vaguely hint at things being able to continue. We could see Grant join some kind of organization similar to how Arby did.
Mm-hmm.
We could see Wilson working with the network on whatever they have planned next. So there still could be a little bit of like the story can continue with new people in those roles.
Do you
That's
think
my fan fiction.
do you think that we're gonna go back in time at all? Do you think we're gonna see anything from Philip Carvel and Milner from back then, or Christos? Any tie up of those?
I don't see how there's time.
I think there's a lot that we have to go through, and it would be very difficult to have any time dedicated to the past at this point. So I think we were both
Right.
wrong in saying that coming back to the past is not going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and unless it's similar in length to when Jessica Hyde had the was it dream about Crystal, like the tree scene.
Yeah, in season
And
one.
unless we have a scene about that length that's like a flashback, so
Okay.
keep it short, minute, two
Maybe.
minutes
We might
max.
get it.
So I could see like short flashback, but I
Okay.
definitely don't see like dedicated scene, start to finish that takes up a decent chunk of time. So that's the
Right.
most I could see them contributing to it, but who knows?
So you're talking about Becky and Deals. Do we think Becky's gonna die? Do we think A, Becky's gonna die in this episode, and B, do we think Becky's hallucinations are related to her deals?
I mean, I think I originally brought up the question, but it doesn't quite seem to fit for me, I don't think, like hallucinations. It seemed like it was more of something that caused
Like guilt.
fits like a seizure and then kills. And so I think it's probably guilt.
Okay. So the only thing I notice in this episode, right before she sees Miles, she eats
I think
the
Are you talking about Marius?
Marius. I always
Marius.
say his name wrong. Man, Marius Miles. When she sees him with the giant hole in his head. She took the thing. So like, was she having a deals episode and she just needed to pop that? Like, that was the like calming to like, she's having an episode. There he is. I got to take the
Oh,
pill. So that's the only, like, I was pretty much thinking that it wasn't a side effect as well, but now I'm starting to believe that it like those hallucinations are a side effect of deals a little bit.
that's that's interesting seeing it happen like right after she takes the pill. So I wonder if it's she feels it coming on because she was getting kind of anxious. She feels it coming on. She takes the pill, and then like at that stage where she feels that level of anxiousness, that's when it continues on a little bit because it's not like pills are instant, unless you've got one of those that like dissolves in the bloodstream on the way down. They take a little bit of time, so
Like
she
if she's
still
had,
has
yeah,
part of it, and then 30 minutes later it finally is starting to act, and now she won't have any more hallucinations or any other side effects of deals.
yeah.
I can see that. I can buy that.
That's I do think they are making the hallucinations look like deals. Like it is a side effect of deals. And I don't we just don't know too much about deals. Might get more in the next episode. Um One thing that you've hit on quite a bit this season was the broadcasts that we've been hearing. And I feel like in this episode we got a huge payoff where the characters acknowledge the broadcast.
That was the big part. Yeah, because in the past it's been so much in the background that it could be easy to not notice. In fact, I think the first time that I heard one of the broadcasts, I didn't even pick up on it. I did a second watch through of that episode, and when I heard that there was a broadcast going on during the opening, I thought to myself, this is important, but I don't know why. And so I just transcribed it. It wasn't until the second broadcast that I started to notice some kind of, like a pattern. And that was another background broadcast. It wasn't the main thing. And the characters actually start talking over it as they're making breakfast,
Right.
so you don't even get to hear the whole thing. So it really is hard to focus on it. And this is the first one you said it. Milner points it out, and things have escalated to the point of riots.
Right. Like we're about to go into a full-scale war. It seems
Right.
like US and China are US is moving some ships ready to fight China over something, and I do think that it is very cool that it brings it into the real world a bit. It makes it feel like this is something that really took place and like that we're building up to like almost an extinction event of humanity at this point.
And at this point, it really does feel like it fits into real world events. I buy that things are escalating in this manner to this kind of conclusion. And while I don't agree with the network about the solution for dwindling resources, it's hard not to argue with their finding of the problem
Right.
and saying we this is a problem. Dwindling resources are a problem. The continued expansion of the human race is a problem. The rate that we multiply at, and we need a solution. The difference is I don't agree with their solution, but they do a really good job of painting the picture of this is a legitimate problem that will be affecting possibly our generation, definitely the next.
Right. Like it seems like that humanity is already like they're setting a picture in the background that humanity is already fighting over resources. It's getting this bad right now and everybody's okay, but 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, what is the next, you know, step? How do we get past
Right.
this?
Yeah, it's cool how they've kind of brought that in. So, another one of the things that we've touched on that I wanted to get a little bit more into because I thought it's kind of interesting seeing this being fleshed out some are cycles.
Yes.
So, I think that we are seeing situations where horrible choices have been made that have affected somebody negatively, and then that person has chosen to make those same choices on other people, knowing the effects they will have on others, or somebody that has something horrible happen to them taking on the mantle of the person that did the horrible thing to them. So knowing that they'll be kind of continuing that on. Similar kind of things, like people taking on the roles of these terrible things where they were at one point, the person on the receiving side that is now becoming the person that will be kind of dealing in these. And I would say that my three kind of examples of this, we've got the most painful is the Holocaust and Anton's decision and choice. So during the Holocaust, a choice was made about a people that should be the people that should continue and populate the world, and others should be extinguished. And now Anton is doing the same thing. He's chosen a people, and he was in the Holocaust. He was in one of the kill centers.
Right.
So we've got Mr. Rabbit and Wilson Wilson, and I think that that's an interesting one. Whereas I think that we saw Anton kind of make the choice to choose a people. I think with Wilson Wilson, it's been more forced, and to some extent, it is. Even though he's had horrible things happen to him, ideologically he believes in what the group is doing, but then he's forced into the decision of killing Ian's brother, and it feels like he's being pushed more into the role versus
Right.
Anton kind of made that choice. And then I think one of the most interesting ones is Grant and Arby, who Grant is a son without a father. His father pushed him away, and Grant is looking at him almost like a father-like figure, and Arby is pushing him away because in Arby's mind, he he doesn't want to create another killer.
Right.
And so he's trying to push Arby away. But I think that rejection is only feeding into Grant's instincts that may push him towards kill. Like it's making him want to act out more. Not getting
Mm-hmm.
accepted, not being loved, is making him want to act out. And it's going to extremes of wanting to kill.
Right. Now,
So
I
that's a really sad one.
yeah, and I do think that they did show a really interesting dynamic between Philip Carvel, Arby, and Grant in this episode, almost like that reinforces your cycle repetition. When they're like running out, going to hide, and Grant says, "Oh, I'm your partner," and Arby's like, "We're not partners." He's mad at him, and they're going to this place, and it's this like nice, beautiful hillscape. There's all this nice, lush nature, and Arby says that this is somewhere that a father takes his son, and we see that Carvel is the son of or the father of Arby, and at one point Arby even tells Grant that I'm your father, that's your granddad, and it's like almost another repetition of that cycle, like another reinforcement of what is to come.
Right. And that scene was so painful to watch because so Arby says the kind of place a father takes a son, and Grant responds with, "Is that the place we're going, you and me?" So Grant is making it clear that he thinks Arby is talking about him as a son versus, Anton potentially taking him. And Arby doesn't Arby doesn't acknowledge Grant. He just walks away to his dad, Anton, who's picking some type of plant.
Right.
And so he's looking. So Grant tries to respond to Arby. Arby ignores him and walks away. Arby goes to his dad, Anton, who Anton just walks right past him to Grant and gives him this plant. And it's this so painful, exchange of one adult ignoring another child and wanting love from his adult parent, who then ignores him for another child. And it,
And we did see a couple times that Carvel would only speak to Grant because he thought Grant was Arby. Another part of that cycle of like or Carvel, Anton, whoever is the dad, and Grant is the next Arby, and that's him seeing him as the next Arby, maybe.
yeah, how awkward was it when Arby is telling Grant what to say to Anton, his dad, and he says, "Say, why did you do this?" And Grant says, "Why did you do this to him?" And Arby says, "No, no, no.
No, no.
Say
Why did?
me.
Yeah,
Why did you do this to me?" And Anton responds to Grant as if he is his son,
right.
and he will not communicate with Arby. I think potentially in his mind, Arby is the monster he never wanted to create, and Grant is potentially still the child with the innocence
The what
that,
Arby could have been, almost.
yes, yes, and probably the Arby that he loved, because I think there was a connection there until he saw that he had a monster, and then he left his son.
Yeah. He said, "I got Jessica Hyde. I don't need you anymore. This is the better one." Heartbreaking.
Yeah, really, really heartbreaking stuff.
I want to talk about the opening. This was a first opening that was completely different. We had, so every opening so far, we have had sky and fields. And, we had talked about that in previous episode about how the network and harvest and how it could relate to everything. This was the first time we opened up on a fast food joint. We see a Burger King knockoff, maybe. Maybe it's a UK place that I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody. But we see it open directly on the shot of a Burger King. Or not Burger King, but the burger store. And we meet Terrence.
Terrence. Yeah. This building was a little weird to me. So like the logo was a little weirdly red. It seemed like that was more of the show colors because there's a definite color pattern that they use.
Right.
And as they walked into the place, there were interesting graphics of like a forest with forest animals, versus more kind of cartoonish, the Hamburglar and
Right.
the Burger King or things along those lines. Like it almost seems like it could be um a health conscious burger place. Like maybe it's makes burgers, but it also has maybe it also has a zero carbon footprint, or something like that. Like it seemed there was something that seemed like a little weird to me compared to like a normal burger place, but I don't know if I was just kind of reading into it.
Do you think that it's. Do you think the burger place is owned by the network?
I it, I don't know. We see in the US version that they have all sorts of, there's like they obviously have like an IKEA. I don't remember what they call it there. Not the network. They call it Harvest.
Harvest, right.
Like there's a whole place where you can get stuff to decorate your house with, and obviously they have like a ninja training school, and they have all these other offshoots. I assume they also probably have a fast food joint. We'll get back to this. I do think in this show we have seen that there is a network watering hole.
Yes, we got some payoff.
So I don't know. Maybe they're. It seems weird. I think it might be a stretch that it's one of theirs. I don't know.
I mean, maybe the nature could be like, we've seen in every opening shot, it has been very nature and, pro earth establishing shots. Maybe The pictures inside of the restaurant are related to that in a way of showing like, oh, this is our connection to nature with this fast food restaurant. Like it still connects the whole theme of how these opening shots work. This time we started on a fast food restaurant to show Terrence and finally get to meet Terrence.
Because it does feel like fast food is the opposite of what the network is trying to achieve.
Right.
You know, if you think about the amount of greenhouse gases that are released by farm animals and specifically I think cows, and you think of
Mm-hmm.
the the kind of the detriment that farming them has on a society, and also the level of just like consumerism that you have with something that is basically diabetes that you don't even have to walk out of your car to get. I assume there's a drive-through, so it like really increases the levels of like obesity and just ruining a planet. Like it seems like everything that the network would be against. So, unless this is like a health focused one, it
Right.
does seem to some extent like it's a comment on consumerism
Right.
and
Right.
just
Right.
a job that maybe Terrence has to have. You got to hold on a job until you can finally do your end game thing.
Right. And poor Terrence getting yelled at by the same guy at the first time we meet him, and then after he gets the call, he is being yelled at by the same guy. I'm assuming it's two different times that he's being yelled at, but same guy just goes in just to yell at Terrence. I think he has a crush.
And Terrence doesn't seem that phased by it. Although he does seem a little bit like he's awkward with customer, support, where he's taking the time to say, "No, I can do that for you, but it doesn't come with it, so I have to remove it." It's like you can just do it. You don't have to.
Right. You don't have to explain to him that it doesn't come that way. Just make the changes on your little machine that you have there. Do it. Do it, fast food
Especially
monkey. Do it.
especially since that's the way he's getting treated. Like if you correct him, he's just gonna get even more belligerent.
I
So it's
did
like, why not just tell him it's done and take his money? And anyways, yeah.
I did get a lot of Arby vibes from him. You know, like season 1 Arby. Like somebody that has been in this network, that has been trained at a certain type of age, that you have a mission to carry out. And, one thing that I did notice was Arby in the first season was always eating chocolate covered raisins. And when we see Terrence, not necessarily at the restaurant, but a couple times we see him at his apartment at different shots, he's eating carrots. And I wonder if that has any correlation. If you have any thoughts on that.
It's it's interesting because we also see him taking public transportation. So maybe he's somebody that, if he's on board with this network thing of taking care of the world and we have to look at the big picture, maybe
Oh.
that's part of his thing is he's very focused on, although I don't know why he would work at a burger joint. So who knows?
Well, maybe that's where he had to work, but the fact that he does take public transport, like that's another way to save the environment. He's eating carrots, so eating not meat. So that is
Right?
definitely I could see that. Maybe he's like so into the cause that he like even changes his lifestyle to fit basically what the goal of the heart of the network is.
And he's so slow at the register that maybe to some extent he thinks that he is reducing the amount of people that will buy fast food because if there's like a backed up line and you're
Right.
driving by a place, you may say like, ugh, is it worth standing in that line? Like his
That's his
his
plan.
incompetence
That's what he does. He just
could
sits there. He's like, I'll let this guy yell at me because it'll make other people leave. They won't buy the shitty
right,
fast food burger.
right. Yeah, I think that's the master stroke that the writers put in there is that he's passive aggressively saving the planet.
I will say I do think we have a confirmation that Mr. Rabbit is Wilson Wilson. He confirms it this time. You know,
Interesting, he says, "We are
we're
Mr. Rabbit."
yes, talking to Leah at the watering hole with the lab coats that are covered in blood. Clearly, they're very bad doctors that just get blood on their back of their shoulders somehow and don't clean them at all. Just always dirty while they're drinking
So
at the bar.
I'm super excited about this. I don't know if you noticed anything new about this pub
I didn't.
because we saw the
No.
lab coats again. We saw the
Right.
blood, right?
We know it's the same bar
Okay,
as
so
before.
yes, we definitely assume that because there's not a lot of pubs I go to where people bring their bloody lab coats. So
True.
and it looks like the same place.
We're not
So
going to the
I
same
definitely think
pubs.
it's right. So I definitely think it's the same place. And you know, I did kind of bring up that I thought that it maybe belonged to the network
Right.
because it did seem like it was we were seeing people from lab coats that worked right next door, and so maybe it's like in the premises
And
and
they
it could be
talk
there
pretty openly
openly. Yeah.
about things.
So we kind of did that, and I was going to jokingly have us come up with funny names for this water hole. Like, what would you call a pub where people meet up to talk about their world's murdering schemes? And as I was thinking about what I thought would be kind of a funny joke, I noticed that I think the pub name is on the glass. So it was
Really?
kind of yeah, so it was kind of and it took me a moment to figure it out because there's curtains covering. Luckily, you can see on two different windows, different parts covered, and the center was the same, so it definitely looked like the same name with different parts covered up. The name of the pub is Adelphi, which in
Okay.
Greek means brothers or brethren, which I think is kind of interesting because they all are kind of brothers or brethren in their belief of saving the world. It's kind of a
Whoa.
cult-like
Yeah.
organization.
That's so cool. Good job, Eagle Eye Sterling. I was gonna assume that it was Janus's anus. You know, that was the name of the watering hole. But Delphi is way better, and it has a better meaning because they're they're like a brotherhood. They're like the brotherhood of evil, essentially.
Right. Yeah. So I thought that that was interesting that it was a named bar and that I believe the name has significance. At least I may just be putting some on there, but it seemed like that to me.
No, I think that that was definitely intentional, and especially I don't think a lot of people would figure that out since you had to take two parts of the word to actually figure it out. But that's a great name for the bar at the network. Now with so the one cool thing with Wilson Wilson is we saw that where he ranks basically in this organization already. You know, we saw Jeff, haphazardly come up with a ransom note for getting you know, an absurd amount of money in a short period of time. And I think about like where Jeff was in the last season and where he is now and his relation to Wilson. Like Wilson Wilson came in after Jeff, but he is above Jeff clearly. Like him and Leah are sitting next to each other like he's an idiot. And he's just like, nah, he's not an idiot. He's doing his best. Look at him go. And I thought it was cool to see where Wilson Wilson basically jumped Jeff in the hierarchy.
I mean I think it points towards why Wilson Wilson was a great Mr. Rabbit and Jeff was somebody who just followed directions. Is that you see that when Jeff is putting together his own plan, it's not a great plan and it's not
What?
for the greater good. He is somebody who is doing something for himself. When Milner asked, didn't ask, when Milner told Jeff to back V-Day, Jeff said, "That'll be political suicide. I'll lose everything." If you look at somebody like Paul at the mall or you look at Terrence, these guys are willing to take their own lives, right?
Right.
And then Jeff is just asked to end his career, but I assume he's made enough money at this point. You'll do fine. Maybe you won't be able to live the luxury life that you had, but you'll be able to live off of what
Right.
you had. Jeff seems like somebody who was always in it for him. By helping out the organization, he was able to climb the ladder and get to these, financial statuses versus Wilson. Wilson is somebody who has done terrible things and been in uncomfortable positions and made tough decisions and not always the things that are right for him, but rather the things that are, if you agree with what they're doing, right for like the larger picture. So I feel like that's why you need somebody like Wilson Wilson in that position. You can't have a Jeff going up to Mr. Rabbit.
So the character of Wilson Wilson, like, he's willing to make the hard sacrifices and decisions himself that will make him be Mr. Rat. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's become so much more clear that Jeff is a follower, not a leader.
Yeah, that's fair. And he's not very bright either. You think about like when he was given that order to kill Let's, and he didn't want to kill Let's, and he realized that he had no choice, otherwise he'd be killed. Yeah, he's definitely more a follower, I would say.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of things that didn't work for me in this episode.
Okay. I can think of one that my wife brought up, so I'm curious what you've got.
So, you know, there we'll get to the ruins. We'll talk about the ruins scene, and I do think that was a
Did they ruin it for you?
it was ruined for me. A ruined. The main scene, really bothersome, was Dugdale's breakout scene, where he's breaking out his wife and Alice.
Yeah,
There
that's the
is
one my wife Dawn didn't like either.
there's so many things wrong with it. Okay, so first off, funny thing, there's a moment that he puts a cell phone up his anus, and at that time, after he puts it in, Mr. Wilson Wilson comes to the house, and they're all under arrest, and there's this very long scene where Becky, Wilson Wilson, Dugdale, and Ian are all just chatting about things, and just having conversations. Mind you, this whole time he has a cell phone up his anus, which that part didn't bother me. I did think that was kind of funny, just thinking about that he's got a cell phone up his butt. Okay, here's what did bother me. He goes in, he takes out the cell phone, he gives the cell phone to them, he goes back down to Becky, who's in the car, and she triangulates the position to what floor and what room that she's in. That's not how GPS works. That's not a thing. That I don't know how you would know which room and where to go. And the next part is he instantly, from that moment when they find him, he calls them to initiate the plan. Hey, this is what's going to happen. And from that moment, we cut to Dugdale, who is in full climbing gear with a full climbing apparatus set up right by the window, who is just getting up right when they open the door. So they get the call, they go to the bathroom. There
You
is
don't have an issue with the climbing, do you?
I mean, I have an issue with the climbing about how they set up that gear. There's no way they could have set up that
We've
gear so fast.
seen this in the original Batman TV show. He's got the belt with all of the stuff, the grappling hook, just shoots it up with like a gun. The grappling hook goes up there, and then there's the scenes where Batman and Robin climb up the side of the boat very easily.
I'm not
So I
saying
buy it.
that Dugdale is not Batman. I've never seen them together. I can't say that he's not. But Dugdale doesn't seem the very Batman type, in my opinion. Come at me, fight me. I don't think he is. But then they easily get this grated window thing off. Like, they don't really show how they get it off, and these people could have just jumped out that window at any point or broken that thing off. They then have to fight this guy. So, then Alice doesn't want to come down, right? She's afraid of heights. So Dugdale goes in. He fights his way through to this one guy. There's cameras in there, so it's not being monitored by anyone else.
And I want to pause here really quickly and go back to your last point, which is probably the biggest issue. You have a child who is afraid of heights, and your options are, let's just try and continue with this plan, or let's have the most awkward man in the world somehow fight his way out of an entire building. We'll talk about how plausible that is. But I get she doesn't want to do it, but Mama can't say, like, close your eyes and I'm going to pick you up and hand you to him,
Yeah.
and just keep your eyes closed tightly and he'll help you with, it's like, you can't just try and push it just a little bit and say, like, let's really try and make this happen. Instead, she's like, you know what? Baby's afraid of heights. You're going to have to,
We're going in the hard way.
You're going to have to James Bond your way out of this stuff. Awkward guy.
Right, so they get in, then they have to navigate from the 4th floor of this building that I'm sure there's more people in. They have to break these people out of this building. And the cherry on top. They get out magically. Somehow they made it out. They escaped the whole hallway full of bad guys because he's basically Batman. He can fight everyone. We know this. The audience knows this. They get in the car right after breaking out. They're out of breath. They're tired. And Becky says hi and says, afraid of heights were we? Like, she already knew that Alice was afraid of heights. When?
Why would she have recommended this plan then?
For a show that is so attuned to detail, I feel like this whole rescue operation was just, it was like the director's niece wanted to write a fun story, and there she was like, all right, get him out of this building somehow. And the niece was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Which is interesting, because I actually did think that there was a really good detail in the setup of this scene, which they may have set that up in prior episodes, so maybe that was good writing in previous episodes and poor writing in this one. But this is not a prison that they are in. This is a large building in an area with a lot of other, 5-6 story buildings, that are all pretty close to each other, right?
Right.
And so if somebody is screaming for help, you could hear them potentially in other buildings. And so that does seem like a weird place to hold people. You can see that the prison part of it is retrofitted. Like, there are bars that are added inside of this room in order to prevent you from getting to the door to get in and out. And in order to prevent sound from traveling, there's sound paneling, right? Like sound absorbing paneling all over the walls.
That's my point. You're gonna have a building with soundproofing. You're gonna be that level of detail, like where we're in a bunch of buildings. We're gonna do soundproofing, but we're just gonna.
So it's interesting that somebody definitely did think of some of the details. Somebody definitely spent time on parts of this, and then somewhere else they ran out of time and or money. And like you said, the niece is writing this part of the episode.
In crayon. I bet it was written in crayon and they couldn't read it, and that was the huge problem.
Whoever's niece this was that wrote this episode, she should be fired.
Yeah, and she probably also wrote about when Ian is trying to hide Marius, not Miles, Marius, in the building. He's just laying some brick. We're in this building. We got cement. We got brick. He's UK's most wanted. He's UK's most wanted. So he's not going to the store to get these supplies. It doesn't look like they're doing any masonry in this building, but he's got all the bricks.
The bricks don't even, now that you say that, the bricks don't even match. They're like different height, different color. And if you look at the width of it, it was a width such that an a whole number of bricks can't fill the gap. So it's like normal size brick, and then you would have to have a cut brick to fill the gap. And then above that, you would have cut grip, normal brick, and then normal brick, cut brick. And you would have to do that. They don't come pre-cut
Right.
for like you never know how long that size is going to be. So what? He knows how to cut bricks. He knows, like you said, he has the supplies. It makes no sense.
Definitely a couple things that I didn't like about this episode. Again, more in the ruins. I don't want to stay too much on this bricklaying thing. It was frustrating, but I do want to talk about Wilson finally meeting up with the group. We touched on it a little bit, but we saw a very like a moment that has been building up all season really of we see Wilson do terrible things. He shot Ian's brother, and now he is coming like he Let's go. He turned on Jessica Hyde at the end of season 1, and now we are seeing the group meet up with him for the first time. And how their relationships have differed, and how Wilson treats Ian after he's just killed his brother, or how Becky treats Wilson.
Yeah, there was all sorts of kind of wild interactions here and questionable choices. And I know that a lot of people are coming down, and each person has their own thing that they're trying to accomplish. The three men that are going, RB, Grant, Anton are going there to escape. Jessica Hyde is going there because she's trying to track down Anton and holding Milner as hostage. And then Wilson is going. It's interesting seeing all these groups kind of convene and what kind of happens around that and some of the choices and sometimes questionable choices that are made around that. Like Grant being given a gun again because that worked out so well the first time you gave him a gun.
All right, we're jumping to the ruins. We're gonna jump to the ruins. The other things that didn't work with me. Yes, why did they give Grant the gun? They gave Grant the gun when it was Carvel and Milner talking by themselves. And why would Grant give the gun to Philip Carvel so easily? And the
I,
last one. No, go ahead.
I buy that one just a little bit because here's my thoughts. So Anton at times is a doddering old fool, right? Like
Right.
he at times he doesn't seem to remember who he is. He slips into speaking another language, even if you approach him directly in English, it's almost like he doesn't know how to speak English. But then when he does speak English, it is so clearly that he does. So it seems like he slips in and out of some kind of consciousness, it seems to me. He is not right in the head. And he's never once seemed like he is at all dangerous. He's old and he's affectionate towards Grant. So he sometimes is a little feely with Grant because he views Grant as his son.
Right.
And so we've seen him touch Grant in a way that's kind of not at all creepy if you haven't seen this, but it's in an affectionate way,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that this was, to me, the way that this looked was another one of those situations where the doddering old fool is coming to you, and that's kind of obnoxious. And if he gets too obnoxious and he like touches me, I'm gonna push him away because I don't like it when he's that kind of like in my face. But he's used to him just approaching him this way. And so by the time he's right there, right in front of him, it's so easy for him to just take the gun before Grant can even realize because it's not like a lot of other situations where you see somebody have to close a gap and make a fast move and that something bad is happening and so your instinct is like, well, I'm going to shoot or take the gun away or something like that or jump away versus this is like such a disarming situation.
Well,
That when somebody's that close and they can just reach to you like they're gonna touch you, and then they just take the gun.
yeah, but
That's how I saw it.
I know, but he takes it so slow from him. It wasn't like a, whoa, got your gun when you weren't paying attention. It was like hand on the gun, taking the gun slowly. And Grant also saw him when they were at the hacker's house where he like goes crazy like into Grant's face. It's like that seems like that would be another reason to not let the doddering old fool hold the gun and let it take it from you slowly. That's a otherwise, little nitpicking there, but otherwise the entire scene was great. I did like, the location of the scene. It was in this very ruined area where I feel was very much a very symbolic of like, the ruins of what Earth will be if humanity continues on, the ruins
Ooh.
of, of Philip Carville's life is right at his feet right now. I thought it was a very nice symbolic.
Yeah, it could be a metaphor for some of the ruined relationships of this group, like Wilson flipping sides. And I was actually wondering the question of ruins seemed like they were significant. And I wasn't quite thinking this could be an apt metaphor for something. And if so, what would it be? So for me, it was another one of those things that was kind of like I saw it and it felt like it should be getting me thinking of something, but I didn't quite know what, so it wasn't worth talking about for me. But I like that.
Yeah, and piece of foreshadowing that happened. There was a moment where when Jessica Hyde and Milner first drive up before they all run into the group, she says to Milner, she says, you're not going to survive this." She gets all in her face with the knife. She's like, "You're not going to survive this," which was a nice little foreshadowing touch of Milner's death in the episode
Right.
that I thought was very nicely
That's
done.
a that's a good call. Damn. Yeah, and then it's great foreshadowing and then total great payoff when it happens. And it really feels to me like that is the most serious of the death. The fact that they took time to have Jessica Hyde take the bullet out of Arby kind of makes me feel like he's got a fighting chance.
I have a theory about this, about RB
Okay.
living. So we see Jessica Hyde drop him in this like building. Like she brought him in this thing, and RB was talking about that they were looking for a bunker that had moss growing on top. And it zooms out, and there's moss on top of that little thing that they're in. What if that's the bunker and there's like a little medical facility down there because they're very far away, so I can't imagine him surviving a trip somewhere. What if there is a medical lab down there and that is what saves Arby's life?
Oh yeah, I see that because this was also I think around the time that he's being trained to be an assassin. So I could definitely see that bunker as being you've got to have supplies.
Right.
There's possible, dried food and water and possibly medical supplies.
So that is the one thing that makes me think that Arby's going to survive. I think that they're going to be able to, stitch him up in there, something along those lines, and we will see a conclusion with Arby. There is one more thing that I have to nitpick on about
Okay.
this last scene, and that
Yep.
is one thing that they made abundantly clear in this episode was that where they were is there's no service. Jessica Hyde couldn't track them where they were because there was no service, so she found out the couple that heard the boy swearing. She knew to go, follow them. We knew that a couple people couldn't find exactly where they were. Wilson shows up. He asks Milner if she was able to, if she called it in or can call it off. and we see her call it into Terrence. So my question is, like, Jessica Hyde or Milner was a prisoner of Jessica Hyde. The other three only had the one cell phone that we knew had no service. Maybe Jessica Hyde had a cell phone, but nothing seems like there was a satellite cell phone to put in that order. And that's the other thing I just can't get behind in this episode a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. There one thing that I thought killed it for me. So it always been kind of a standout performance, and especially when you compare it to the US version, is the sparing use of jokes in the UK version. And the fact that they're understated and well done versus I felt like in the US version they were kind of bombastic and kind of silly and not believable in the context and didn't really make sense. Like when in the US version Wilson says that he's trying to cut down to one torture a month, which just doesn't seem very believable that after being tortured and having your eye pulled out with a spoon that you would instead of just sheepishly saying like I can't go through that again. I'm sorry
Yeah.
guys, I gotta leave. Instead making this kind of like cheesy joke. In this version, love this joke. Lee. So Lee, when he is talking to Wilson about the fact that, give me the chance, I can torture these people, I can get the information, and Wilson says, no, don't, and Lee says, aye aye, Skipper, which definitely seemed like it was a dig on the eye. It does, and he does it in such a quiet, understated, almost friendly way.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the fact of knowing the
The
context of the
history.
words,
Yeah.
you know, looking a person in the eye that they have left because you took the other one and saying aye aye.
Right. You're the one that took the eye, and you're saying, oh man, that. Let me put a little bleach in your eye, a little bit more burn.
Right.
Quite.
It just like the jokes that they do in the UK version aren't often, but I do feel like they are well done and land well.
I do agree with that. Now, that actually just brought something up in my mind. Do you think so? They're in that group setting where Wilson is trying to find where Milner is, and he's asking Ian, Becky, Dugdale. I think it's those three. They're asking him at Dugdale's house, and
Yep.
you know, Lee is, by the front door. There is a shot that cuts to Lee, and we can hear the group talking. And Wilson is asking Ian. He's like, "Where's Milner? Where's Milner?" And then Ian says,
Yeah,
"Where's Mr. Rabbit?"
Mr. Rabbit.
So, two questions. One, do we think that Lee, because it does seem like Wilson gets nervous that Lee could hear it, so it doesn't seem like Lee knows. So does he know now? And does Lee know who Mr. Rabbit is now? And do we think that that is going to be significant?
I don't think Lee knows. I don't think it'll be significant. I don't think that Lee is one of the ideological people. I think that Lee likes killing, and that's his place in the organization. There are some people that are there because they believe, and so they can take certain positions that have to do with believing. There's some people like Jeff that can do what they're told and can get into political places. There's some people like Lee that enjoy killing and can do that killing. I don't think he really cares about the ideology. He'll go with whoever's paying him. So I don't think Lee heard that. I did think that was a brilliant line because I do feel like Wilson wasn't really listening to Ian up to that point.
Right,
Ian is trying to say, "Hey, you've got to pay attention to this. This isn't what you think. You cannot go through this plan.
right.
Even you will agree that this plan is wrong. You just need to listen to me." And Wilson is kind of brushing him aside. And Wilson is even he's just focused on where is Milner, and he even threatens. Oh, Ian says, "What are you going to do? Torture me?" And Wilson says, "Maybe." So any of that is on the table. I think Ian knows that he needs to show more of his hand and show like
Right.
we know information. We are important. You can't ignore us. And that felt like the perfect way that was like a snap. And Wilson kind of like you can't say that.
Oh
People might
gosh.
hear that, you know?
Yeah, we don't want Lee to hear it. Scoot him out.
And that I think that got him to pay attention and that changed the focus of the story so that Ian could say, "You've got to check this out." And that's when Wilson finally checks out. So I thought that was a really well done scene.
Yeah, I did like that scene a lot, and it also that kind of reminds me of when Wilson looks at Ian. You know, a little bit later, they're sitting on the couch. They're testing Janus. I think Leah is testing Janus, I believe, and says to Wilson says to Ian, "Don't blame yourself for your brother's death." And Ian is like, "I don't
Oh.
blame my brother myself. I blame you, your friends, and you basically like." And lo and behold, he's the one that killed his brother. I feel like that was a little situational irony right there. That bringing it back from the
Yeah.
previous episode.
That that really was good. Like the fact that Wilson knows that it's his fault when he says to Ian, "Don't blame yourself." And then Ian doesn't know that it's Wilson's fault when he says, I blame your friends. That's like, yeah, you shouldn't be blaming the friends.
I think he says, "I blame your friends and I blame you." So he
Mm.
does blame him. Maybe I could be
I think for being
misremembering.
in the organization, he definitely
Yeah,
didn't seem like he was angry enough at him for killing his brother. It's
right.
more like, how can you take the side
Of
of the people that would kill my brother?
right, exactly. Yeah, I don't think he knows. It's definitely the we your organization is terrible and does terrible things. Any predictions for the next episode?
I think the big prediction I had was kind of like, the two, is it ending or not? Were they planning
Right.
on continuing it? And I say it is ending. They'll wrap it up with an epilogue. Two, who'll live and who'll die? I think Milner's dead. I think that Arby will survive.
How do you
And I
think
don't think I have any new ones.
how do you think they're going to stop Janus?
Okay, so I think, and this is kind of cheating information, so that this I shouldn't really be able to be counted. But once again, if you look at our last video, you will see that when I was watching it and I saw Paul at the mall, I did recognize him as an actor from another show I've watched in Doctor Who. He plays the latest incarnation of the Master, and that is a significant character. And so I feel like we can't be done with Paul. I mean, maybe it's just a cameo, but I feel like he's got a little bit more going on. So here's my thought.
Okay.
Um, Somehow they use Paul at the mall. He is ideological, but they can convince him, like they've convinced Wilson, that the old plan isn't the right plan. He needs to help them out with this new plan. He knows where all of these things are. And so I don't know. He deals with Terrence. He helps them to tell them where these are. I think he has a part in this. So I'm going to say we're going to see Paul at the mall again,
Okay.
and he is going to assist them in bringing down Janus.
Do you think that we're going to see a redemption of Wilson? See, he seems like he doesn't want. He's trying to stop Janus at this point. Is there a redemption? Does he not become Mr. Rabbit? Or is it
I could
ambiguous?
I could I think it might be ambiguous. I think they might show him continuing on with the network, and in some capacity, but you don't. So it like insinuates that there's more to come, but you can't tell how or what, So it continues that theme of cycles of somebody else taking over, and that just becomes an untold story of what do they do? Is Is it greater or not as bad? Maybe this becomes kind of like a background organization that isn't doing huge plans, but is working towards bettering our worlds in less evil
Almost
ways. Who knows?
almost like a good Mr. Rabbit. Like he's trying to solve humanity's problem without doing negative things.
Right.
I could
And
see
they could
that.
even just leave it ambiguous that he's continuing on with the network and you don't know what capacity.
Okay.
Is it in a better way or is it in, more of the same way? We'll see.
I think we're gonna see a bit of a redemption from Mr. Rabbit. I think, or Wilson Wilson. I think that seeing how he felt about this, how Janus was going to only affect Roma people, and that it was only going to it was going to basically make the vaccine not work for anybody that wasn't Roma. I think
Right.
that is gonna maybe set him on a course correct. Like he's gonna kind of realize the error of his ways, and he's going to try and be better. Maybe he will still be Mr. Rabbit, but I think he'll try to be better. And I think with that about does it, folks. Thank you for joining us this episode. We have finally did it. We have one more episode, the season finale of Utopia. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm Mark. This is Sterling, and we'll see you next week on The Road Goes Ever On and On. Thanks a lot.
See you next week.